it seems like a good habit for us to keep having. All right. So it's still saying setting up. So I'm just gonna hold some dead air for a second. Okay. We are live. And yeah, the discussion we were having just before you joined, Michelle, is I'm setting up I'm refactoring the poverty scale stuff into a module. And it's loading data from a JSON file. There are a couple places where there could be errors there. And I was just trying to think about how to handle the exceptions that could, things that could go wrong in that process. And then also eventually I'm thinking about making this a standalone API endpoint, and there it will be easier to figure out. We're going to return a JSON blob with the right status code and people just have to handle it. But it's a little bit trickier to figure out where to hide errors, where to show them in the module file. So that's
Sounds
what we're
fair.
talking about.
Yeah. So we're mostly talking about handling like values that are not valid, like undefined or of an invalid type.
I mean, it's mostly the reason I was thinking about it first is file handling. So does the file exist with the right name? And then is it valid JSON? But potentially also data types or something we can think about.
Yeah, logs seem good. I mean, it'd be great to show a page, but I don't think we can.
That's the issue. If it's a module, you don't have, or at least the module probably, if it's like, if we want it to be a separate standalone like Python module, it can't show pages. If we want it to be a docassemble specific module, it seems kind of bad practice to show your own pages if it's just supposed to be like a Python only docassemble module. But
is there a way to feed into docassemble errors, like to show them on the page? So there's some kind of stack trace and like docassemble has its errors.
Well, if we throw an exception, it will show as an exception in docassemble. But the problem is, I think we probably don't want to do that when someone just imports their module.
Okay.
But I guess what we could do is just let it bubble up when someone calls the function explicitly, and then just say you have to handle error states here.
the only other thing that I like a lot, but it's mostly a like functional Java thing, is just like the sort of like wrapper types, where it's like you have like optional is one and like result is another good one, where it's like you're either going to get your Boolean, or if it's optional, you just get like nothing. It's like you either get your Boolean that's true or false, or you get nothing if it's not set up correctly. And if you get nothing, you have to handle that. Or if it's like a result where you either get the like thing you wanted, which was true or false, or you get like an error. And like one of those things is good. And if you like, it essentially forces whoever's doing that to like, you have to handle both of those cases, and you can't just be like, it doesn't make you look. I guess it mostly like, it doesn't make you like know off the top of your head that, oh, exceptions might be passed through, or like check some error code somewhere else. And so it's all the infos you need is in this like thing that you pass back, and the developer has to unwrap that. But I don't know how well they like types like that work in Python, because they work really well in Java, where you just have like you have a function that handles both of those cases, and you essentially have to case it, and you will always do the right thing in that case. But I don't know how well you can like enforce that in Python.
Well, actually, I think that's like is a pretty Pythonic pattern, because functions can return none. And I think that's essentially it's the exact same pattern. It's just that there's not strong typing in Python, so you don't need a special type to handle it.
The thing about returning none is that you can't return why it's none.
Correct. So the question is, like, should we return an
it's
exception or return none and log the exception? I guess that's really
I guess the other thing is, if you do none, I guess it doesn't feel like it's still false. I guess you can test for it. Yeah. I guess, yeah. So in our examples, we should just also explicitly test for it, because if it's not, it's falsy, and it looks like if people are using it in just like a really dead simple way, that they won't actually see what's going wrong.
Well, the thing that I like about it, now that we've said that out loud, is that you can't do exception handling in Mako. as far as I know, like not inside the Mako of of a sub question, for example, in DocuSign, but you could test for none in Mako. So,
Oh, fair, yeah.
okay. I think that gives me some good directions to go in. So thank you. We'll go back to our regularly scheduled programming. Sorry to hijack that. So let me pull up our agenda. And I know we had some stuff from last week that we should carry over because we didn't get to it. But if anyone has anything else they want to add, let's do a little bit of that brainstorming now. And let's see. I'm going to say probably next week we should skip this meeting. At least for me, it'll be my first day on campus, and I think it'll be a little bit busy, but it might not be, but it probably still be easier for me if we didn't have the meeting that week.
Do other folks want to meet that week?
I would say I would lean towards not having meetings without me there unless there's like a really urgent need for it. The one thing I will say is that I am going to be on vacation on the, oh no, I won't, never mind. 23rd, I can still do it. I'm not leaving till the afternoon.
I'm just, at some point we talked about the like having meetings just to like go over problems that we're working on. Like if we wanted thoughts, other people's thoughts, it wasn't just for assembly line. Right.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I mean, people can always talk to each other. Yeah, I guess this is an interesting, like a mix of formal and informal stuff that we're doing here. A lot of it does end up just being discussion and bouncing ideas off each other. So,
yeah. So I'd love
I would
to
say
hear
for
from
the,
other folks. Okay, go ahead.
well, I do like the idea of going to things like that. And if things go well, and I'm still here post October, I would love to start going to those, but probably until then, like if we're not doing AL stuff, I'm probably going to be head down on Tyler stuff for just like the next month and a half. So I probably won't go next week either.
Okay. Well, Lily, maybe you and I, depending on if you're available or if we have things to talk about, but we'll see closer to the time. Cool.
all right, but I am available on the 30th. I was just realizing I thought I might not be, but. Okay, so if we have anything to postpone from this week, we'll move it to the 30th. All right.
Okay, I have a few items. I don't know when we have time to do it, but
Yeah, let's just add them. Go ahead.
one quick one is that I have some PR requests, pull requests. So I think Quentin, you have reviewed most of the first one. If you could just finish before you go to vacation, that'd be great. That's the waiver changes because I don't want to lose track of it. I also have new changes, but I want to wait until that one is merged.
It's totally fair. Sorry about that. I just actually was just thinking about that this weekend. I was like, oh, I owe Lily a response to that. I just lost track of your reply to my suggestions.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
look
okay.
at that today.
So on Friday, I added a new pull request that's to resolve a bug where the Weaver now just duplicates the attachment files without much reason. But I mean, when I look at the code, I kind of fixed it. So I want you to look at that one as well. So there are two pull requests for the Weaver.
Okay.
So that's a quick item.
It sounds really familiar to a bug that I thought we'd fixed. So either it's the same bug and it just wasn't in your branch, or it's a new bug that's the same thing popping up. But okay, but I should take a look at that for sure.
Yeah, I pulled the new one on Friday. So
okay,
from
that
the
kind of answers that, I guess.
main branch.
Okay.
Okay, second item is that last week we talked about the server release procedure. So I created a checklist as a starting point for us to discuss. So whenever we have time, we can discuss that one.
Awesome.
And then third item is, okay, I'll wait until you.
Can you say it a little bit louder, Lily? I just didn't hear.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The third item is I made some visual changes for assembly line project. I mean, in repo, so I can do a demo whenever we have time.
Okay. All right. And then I'm not sure who added these. Abstraction architecture. That sounds like something we put off a couple of weeks that maybe Michelle, you brought up, but I don't see your name on it. So I wasn't sure if you added that. Just put your name on the other items.
I do not recall.
Carried over from last week.
I believe the abstraction architecture was, I don't remember about.
I
the
think
second
it's,
one.
yeah, it's Michelle, but I don't remember the details. But if she doesn't remember, then maybe it's not important.
I don't have
The
that
one I
copy.
had was related to the doc website.
Okay. All right. Let me just, we'll just cross it out to say we're not talking about it.
I think that, Michelle, maybe it's related to your test frame.
Testing framework.
Yeah, testing frame.
I mean, there's lots of feedback I'd like on that, but I don't think the abstraction architecture
So in the past, that was, we were talking about it and there was the example of the multi-signature flow. But I don't know. Oh, anyway, speaking of testing though, so definitely kudos, Michelle, for all your work last week to help reproduce or not reproduce that issue. That
Yes.
seems like it was a database one, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we're right about that.
Yeah,
So thanks for the work on that.
you're totally welcome.
All right, so since we can't remember what it probably isn't higher priority than our other items, but we can always bring that back.
Sure.
I think I remember hearing you say that this was already solved, right? How to give users the ability to say which links are downloadable, should be downloaded. in the
I
test.
think so. Issues may still come up because people can't specify, like if a file with the same name, if files with the same name are on the page, and they are different documents somehow,
I see
then
what you mean. Yeah.
then that will be a problem. But I don't know how to. I don't know how to approach that. So.
I think we can push that work back on the developer at that point if their files don't have unique names. I mean, it's not like it's like, oh, you say that shouldn't be a requirement of the testing framework. But on the other hand,
yeah,
there's not a really good reason I can think of to give every file the same name. That'll be a confusing user experience once they download the stuff.
it's true. Sure. But then I should also remove the warning for finding multiple files of the same because we have view and download. Never mind. That's fine. Whatever. It's good.
Right. And just keep in mind, I don't know if you've been doing this in your testing, but if you have a docx original and it's type equals, I forget the name of the parameter, but the view and download link are not always the same file type. Sometimes one's a docx, one's a PDF.
It will use whatever text. It just partially matches text in a URL it just partially matches the text of the download file. So
Okay.
like as long
I
as
mean,
you
if it's
have
looking for
docx or
something
.zip,
.pdf,
if the developer writes a .pdf, it'll download the .pdf. If the developer writes .x, it'll download the .x. So
Yeah, I might be totally irrelevant. I just wanted to make sure you were aware that sometimes they're different
okay, yeah.
file names, but it's probably not very important from what you've described so far.
Mhm.
Is it all right if I move this testing one down just because we've been talking testing a lot recently, but if there's big blockers for you, Michelle, then I don't have to. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, I also don't remember what that one was. So syntax methodology.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Well,
I'm trying to
let's
think of it.
put it on for the 30th then, and then there's some time for you to think about it and flesh out that bullet. Does that sound good?
Sure. I'll be even less likely to remember what it was then. That's
Okay.
fine. That's fine.
If you want to spend some time thinking about it now,
Yep.
that's fine.
No,
I was gonna say,
keep going.
just
to you today.
our conversations now might trigger some memory in the next
Yeah,
40
yeah,
minutes or whatever.
sure.
All right. Well, let's see. I think these are both really pertinent to talk about today. If we can give you a little bit more direction and feedback, Lily. So I'm not sure which one is higher priority. So why don't I just let you take over screen sharing and you can start where you would like to start.
Okay, I think the demo is quicker than the checklist because that one will have to brainstorm.
Okay.
All right, so this is the opening screen. I changed the color of the header and the footer, and then this one I try to make it stand out as a brand. I don't know if the TM is the right symbol to use, or like a copyright or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas here. So and then here I just switched the paragraph. I think this was on the bottom. I switched up here, and this one is just as a reminder that kind of a warning. Now here I just noticed, see this is green words, but these are not green. So I don't know what's going on here. Just a side note. All right, so now so that's one page. And then the about page is the second one that has colors. So I made four panels. Now this one, I don't know if we need it because it's on here. In feedback is already in the footer. Do we still want it to be on this page? So that's a question for us to think about. The rest is basically similar to the Weaver. So we have version, authors, and credit. And then the last page, again, here also I changed the color of the like headings. And then the last one is the download screen. I also added the, let's see if I can try to use this one.
Curious to know if this answer snapshots would be the one probably, which is one of the things I realized I should change the order of what it's loading. Try the second link.
Right. Okay. Huh. I finished that one. It was on the download.
So I've been thinking about, I have a couple of things that might be helpful. Let's see. One is I found a tool that helps you choose Bootstrap theme colors so that they all fit together visually, which is really, I mean, there's a lot of theme generator kind of tools, but this one specifically helps you make sure that you meet all, it has suggested colors. When you choose or fix a couple colors, it'll match them so that it meets all of the Bootstrap elements, which is, I think, pretty helpful.
Yeah, I also did try Bootstrap.
Can I ask a question real quick? This is just for mass access, right? These styles?
Right now, I'm just experimenting and see the ideas, if it's worth the effort, and then we can decide where we do it. So basically, those are the three screens I've changed: the opening screen, the about screen, and the download screen. So
So tell us about the changes here. Was it mostly to put it inside a color panel? Or were there other changes to the table that we should be paying attention to?
it is the color panel. You just add a div, but this is different from Weaver in that, because now people have their own way. I mean, they're doing their own forms, so the style is kind of additional. Now, then we needed to say, okay, do we want to have our branding kind of colors so that people either choose it or override it, or we still insist something of our flavor so that we know this is using our stuff in some sense. At least, let's say you're using document, right? You're using some of our components, and we want to put some kind of stamp there saying this represents whatever we are producing. So
I
that's
think-
why I only did the opening and download. For the rest, it's their own interview.
I think if this is going to be mass access, then it's okay to have our branding on it. I think if it's assembly line, it should be as light touch as possible with styles, because it's like putting a big watermark on it that people can't or have to work to change. As opposed to, I mean, if we really want people to use this,
Right.
we don't want to create that obstacle, right? Because if this page, if the start page and end page looks very different for an organization from their other pages, that's going to be disruptive.
Right. So for that reason, then we can like put these kind of things in a way that can be replaced easily. Now, I only had time.
Something we could do is, I don't know if the AL generic jurisdiction quite served its purpose yet, but in theory, that's a place to put a demo file people can customize to change the branding for their organization. So this is the kind of thing that could definitely go there. It's like, hey, here's an example brand you could take and use, and you can see how different you can make assembly line projects look by changing to use this theme, for example, the CSS.
Yeah.
But I guess some of these aren't just CSS, some of them are semantic changes, aren't they? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
although this is more a
Definitely.
default, this is actually gets generated in the Weaver. It's not something that's hard coded.
Right.
Maybe can we go back and if that's this, I think that's good help context, but maybe there's some specific feedback on specific pages we can give. Okay.
I think it'd be probably really useful to just have a designer look at stuff as far as like redesigning. Because I think there's, stuff they know about colors and things like that. And, from practices. Like I think the Court Forms Online TM, the color of that, the style of it is a bit disruptive visually. But I think a designer would just be able to bring stuff together right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. If we can find some experts, that'd be wonderful.
One thought that I have here, and I think Michelle's right. So I don't have, I'm not a designer, and I have mild color blindness to boot. So let's see. One thing that I do notice though is maybe limiting it to one panel per screen might be a good visual goal to have. Because you're trying to highlight something, and if everything is highlighted, it's hard to know what to jump to. I don't know that anything on this screen does need the highlighting, but if there were, I would say maybe like the note type content. So if we go back to the open one, Lily.
Yeah, let me see. Let's just try it now.
Yeah, so, oh, you're just trying to see what we can look like without it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I would say like, I'm not sure which one you put in a panel now. Is it everything in one panel?
The opening screen, yes.
I would say like if you're going to try to put all the content in a panel, we might think about instead changing the background color of the page. I
So
think
yeah.
like white is a little bit less common now. Obviously, it's really good for readability. But if you have a really neutral light color, I see a lot of websites with like a very light gray or manila type color. Maybe not manila is not the right word. Not that.
I do have one.
But that might be a way to change the color of the page to cover everything. But I think the panel really should be highlighting something, right? Like a note to me.
I really feel like
Okay.
there's not, I feel like we could go back and forth. Like I have a lot of thoughts on design, and I'm not sure they agree with other thoughts, you know, I see here or I'm hearing, and I think maybe having a designer is just a better use of our time than trying to critique the design
Well,
here.
I think you're probably right. I think there's like, I don't know where the designer is going to come from though. So that's one thought. I think we could still have some general principles. Something I would
look for one a few times, but I've said, you all tell me when that's, you know, when the project is ready to take input from a designer.
I don't really remember any conversations like that where we said don't get a designer. But I mean, one more thing I think that's really important to say here, and I'm going to say it even though it's not the final word. I think that the page content on the first screen needs to fit all above the fold. So here there's like important elements in the footer. I don't mind if they scroll off on other pages, but they need to fit on the first page. And we have this HUD here, which maybe once that's removed, it would all fit on one page, but I would just urge you to test that. It's like, if we removed this, would you be able to see the footer on the first screen?
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
important.
Because right now we are already see the beginning of the footer. If we
Yeah.
remove that, there's definitely what the whole thing issue.
I would say it should, but I would just want to make sure that it
You can
does.
try it really quick with the inspector if you want, but you know.
And then also like,
It's right
it's
there.
partly like how you played around with these panels, those added some more padding with them all in one panel. It's more compressed than it was before.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so like we could, so my thought about designers is, yes, I think we can, I think we need a designer who's willing to engage with us where we are, like we don't necessarily have like, here's a thing to do for us, except we
Can
could
you
have
say
them
that
on-
one more time? Because you buzzed for a while.
I think, yes, having a designer, I mean, it's going to be helpful for us now to have somebody who can engage with us where we are, which is we don't have a discrete set of like, here, give us feedback on these 10 items and then you're done. It'd be more like, hey, can you be around and be involved in conversations? So I don't see any reason, if that person exists, I don't see any reason to not reach out to them now. I think I already mentioned this. There is design work happening on the Up to Code tool with some designers I really trust. They're the ones who built Portforms Online's design for us. At least it's the same shop. It's not
But they
Rose.
wouldn't do this kind of work.
It's going to probably be informative to us. So it doesn't mean we should have one unified brand for that project, which is not assembly line. It just uses assembly line framework. It's part of the Made brand,
Mhm.
but it could be really informative for us.
And I think mostly this is, I don't like this shop is not going to be like a volunteer work for us.
They're going to do some design mock-ups for Up to Code that I think we might learn a lot from.
Yeah,
Assembly line generally. But yeah, they're getting paid to do that work. They've done volunteer work for assembly line, and they might in the future.
Oh, okay.
It might be a lot easier for them now that they've done this. If once they finish the design for Up to Code, like, hey, this is the same framework. Can you take what you just did there and help us adjust it so it meets a different brand? But it's probably just going to be swapping colors might be enough to make it unique. I don't know, because that process hasn't started.
The idea of providing this as a demo of what assembly line, how you could change styles. One, I wouldn't want it to be just on the first and last page. If we're going to change styles, it should be consistent throughout so people could use it without modification if they need to. Like if they don't want to modify, they could just use it as is. Two, it depends how very specific we get with our styles. And like how, like if it's just a matter of changing a, a color variable, then that's easy for them to change. Whereas depending on what we do, it can get much more complicated for them to change. So just something to consider.
I don't know if there's anything more to dig in there, but I'm not sure if I fully understood what you're saying, but I think I don't know if there's more to dig into there. But I think that the main takeaway is like, well, actually, I'm not sure. Are you saying we shouldn't have a demo file?
If we have a demo file, then it should affect all the interview, not just the first and last pages.
Well, this one would, right? Because it's changing the toolbar colors, the nav bar and the footer.
And it's also
the
changing
headings.
The heading.
It's changing everything that isn't semantic stuff that's in interview questions. Like it's not adding panels to your questions because that would be something you would have to add. But I feel like at least if we have like here's a first screen and here's a last screen, which have examples of how to add these panels in your questions, that feels like it's like at least like usable enough for people who want to do something similar. I understand I think at least I understood your comment, Michelle, to just be like, if we do have something that's available, it needs to be like, there shouldn't be like, it doesn't need to be fully encompassing and like how to change every aspect of your like design of your interviews, but it should be complete in that like, there's not going to be a weird gotcha for whoever tries to use this out of the box, like demo theme.
And it should be simple for them to change it back or change it to whatever they want it to be.
Yeah, it should be simple for them to change things around. Like I think, I don't know if we'll be able to say like, it will be
like,
simple for them to change everything about it, but like the things that they can change, it should be simple.
Like there should be access to our CSS file so they can see all the styles we implement so that they don't have to guess. And because if you define some rules in your CSS, some new rules, they're like, they can see a page and they go, okay, I fixed the things. But actually, when there is a help button, or when there is a set of buttons, or when someone hovers over a term or something, if we affect those kinds of styles, there'll be gotchas for them later. They'll come upon them when they happen to include that element in their screen, and they won't be able to fully account for all the things we do and change in assembly line. If we wanted to provide example CSS, I think we could provide a CSS files that they could include or not include. So maybe they could just in their Weaver generated interview, they could just delete that line if they don't want to include that CSS. But I wouldn't make it built into assembly line for sure.
So I don't know if you know what I was talking about. That's kind of what I'm getting the sense of. So we have a package called AL generic jurisdiction, and I think it's totally unused.
And
but
you're
the whole point was to
suggesting
be a
putting
demo.
CSS in there.
Right.
Oh, freaking sorry.
That's okay.
Not
it's not-
Yeah,
understanding
no,
that
I agree. I
was
don't think we
there.
should bog down assembly line with a bunch of demos. I think documentation is great. We don't need a ton of demo files there. I think AL generic jurisdiction is the place for demos to go. And
Okay.
for me, I'm okay with them not being really polished yet. Just thinking of like MVP is someone can learn a little bit more about how to customize it, and it's just a demo file and it's clearly labeled that way. I'm okay with it.
And it
And
should
it-
also use Bootstrap CSS well. So it should use
So here's a,
Bootstrap
Yeah,
color
that's-
variables and Bootstrap, right?
here
Variables.
I'm going to show you now, this is the individual interview. So I'm going to use my own Bootstrap theme and see what it looks like.
Actually, so this is a Bootstrap theme that, I saw that it's from a CDN actually. So, okay. Yeah. So you had, and previously you did change some
So-
CSS. Was that in a,
So the heading looks like it's not using a Bootstrap variable.
I think
Right.
probably the
Right,
CSS is being overridden, right?
So I'm saying if we do provide an example, we should do something that uses Bootstrap CSS appropriately.
I think it's just being overridden by another CSS file. It's my guess, because it's
I-
affecting every headline.
Right, it's the demo that Lily made that is overriding it.
Can
And
we
you were
inspect
saying
it
we
and
would
just see?
affect the demo.
So this is the demo. So I did this.
How did you
But then you
change
also-
the headline color, Lily? Was that from
This one
inline
is
CSS,
right.
or is it?
It's from our own
Styles.css? Okay.
Right. I mean, definitely there's more work to do, but I just want to show you
Yeah.
broadly
Sure.
what's the effect if someone use a different theme. So, I mean, so far it's this one need to be.
I like the experimentation. I mean, I think there's a lot of benefit to adding some colors to our interview. I think we got so much feedback about the colors being sad and uninviting, which was so funny when we did door-to-door knocking in Chelsea. So people do care about colors, and it's good to be able to show ways to do it. And I agree that I think we can get a designer's eye to help figure out what are the right set of colors for our project. So
Okay, all right. So
For
are we
the-
good?
For the generic jurisdiction thing, right?
but demos can go in there, and I'm okay with them being experimental, honestly, but because it's just one more learning point. Once you know what you want your design to be, you can look at the file and say, oh, where do I implement that? And it might help someone figure out to do it. We should think about how to name stuff so it's easy to see like, oh, this CSS file is tied to this demo. It shouldn't overwrite the main styles.css.
Well, right now, the changes you see are actually spread in part of it. It's in like a
the QL
question,
baseline.
like a base.
Yeah.
in
So I
here.
would copy those questions into your interview file too. So that way, like, they don't override the base, they just are an example.
Okay.
Into the jurisdiction, the generic jurisdiction demo, right?
Yeah, unless someone has a different idea, if we should make another package for that, I'm fine, but it feels like it could be used for this purpose. It hasn't really been used by many people
Sure.
yet.
Sure. I like
I
this
think
purpose
that's a
for
good
it.
purpose, yeah.
And I linked on the chat and in the, well, let me just show it to you since it's recorded, because no one can see it. Is that all right, Lily? I'm going to just take over the screen sharing for a second. So here is what I use to generate colors in just recently for a client, which was, I think, really helpful. So you can choose like a color and lock it. So I don't know, I think what's Suffolk Lit Labs color, something like this, let's say. And then I click generate and it will match the other colors to use in my design to fit with that. And I think what was really nice for me was if I scroll down, it will get all the colors for the buttons. I always spent so much time manually trying to match those up. So that is, I think, a helpful website. And then the other one that I used with not the best success until Michelle helped me fix a bunch of mistakes in it is this Bootstrap Magic. It was relatively easy to use. Basically, Bootstrap uses like an SCSS file where you can compile it with whatever your theme colors are. But this is a way to not have to, download all that stuff onto your command line. So it's just a web-based version of that. And so I could go in here, change the brand colors. Mostly what I do is here in this theme colors. It's pretty much the only box I have to change. So it's kind of annoying that they have it broken into one little input box actually. And then once I've done that, I can download that theme file. And then there were a couple of weird things that changed from DocAssemble's default Bootstrap theme that it had to go back in and fix. Which, I can
Also,
document somewhere.
maybe a
to
good
Michelle
thing
finding
to
them.
know. Totally will.
Yeah.
And just a good thing to know is that it does use Flexbox very extensively. So depending on how browser compatible you're being, that's just something to be aware of. But Internet Explorer still has a bunch of bugs, from what I understand. That's what Can I Use says anyway, and they tend to be pretty reliable.
So there might be a better Bootstrap theme generator, but this is the one that I found. And one thing to watch out for is that a lot of the theme generators have already moved to Bootstrap version 5. I think that's on DocAssemble's roadmap, but I wouldn't expect it to happen for at least 5 or 6 months. So, although I don't know why I said that specific number. I have no idea when it will be done. But you need to have one that's still generating Bootstrap versus version 4. That's interesting. So you're saying this did a lot more than just plug in SCSS stuff?
As
It changed more from the default?
Flexbox is CSS stuff. It just like you have to
I don't think
say
you
block.
understood what I'm saying. So like there's a way to generate a Bootstrap theme from the variables, and I thought that was what this did. But you're saying it did more than just do that. It did more than just compile the CSS.
I don't know that that's true, because say there is a class called tab content, it can add the Flexbox styles to it without changing anything in the DOM structure, right? So it's just CSS. The SCSS compiles to CSS. So it just affects, it could have all been done with CSS.
My point was it's doing more than if I had like downloaded, I forget the exact way to do it with NPM, the Bootstrap customization. It would be more than just swapping in the color variables that I explicitly changed. It has other defaults that it changes from the generic Bootstrap theme. Is that what you're saying?
I imagine so. Maybe I should check out the generic thing to see if DocAssemble is using Flexbox. I would have been surprised, but maybe I should look into that more.
Yeah, that's specifically what I was wondering. Like, is Flexbox unique to this generator, or is it just a Bootstrap thing?
Got it. All right, good
Should have been more
question.
clear. Okay.
And then can you post this link?
Yeah,
Okay, to
I mean,
check.
it's not great, and I'll try to add in somewhere the fixes that Michelle gave me to. I want to give you a better link than this. Maybe that is the right link. It is, okay. I'll put that on the chat and I'll put it up in the notes. But yeah, without those fixes, like it's not quite enough. There's some big change, like it makes some big errors in the layout. which I don't remember seeing before. I used this like a year ago and it was fine. So maybe they just have some bug that they introduced recently. But those are the links to what I did. And I can try to document those other changes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, looking at our agenda, I think the next thing is probably the deployment checklist. And I think that's another good place for us to use some time here discussing. So do you want to share
Right.
that next?
Yeah.
Lee?
Sure. Where is my? Oh, here. This one, actually, I think I added the link to the agenda. So if you go here, all right, so those are the two files.
Okay.
One, this is the checklist. This is just an example of the log, what it looks like. So I made a few sections. The first one just goes through the cycle of key package sensitive changes. Because we're making so many changes and making releases. A lot of them are safe, are fine. So this is more to address the sensitive changes. In other words, there are consequences. So rather than the first step is to identify them. So if we are proposing some changes that can have potential ramifications, then we go through some discussion and identify them. And then we develop a list that basically says, okay, these are the interviews that can be potentially affected by these changes. So this one, we will start from base list. I'll talk about that later on. And then we just go through. So that's like a subset of that list. Okay, so here we have, let's say 20 interviews that could be potentially affected by these changes. And then, so this is the initial scope discussion. And then as you go through, your development, you may have some other surprises that come up that could also either increase or decrease this list. So we just go through it again, just discuss it again. And once it's developed, you release it to the test server. At that point, okay, here I'm very, very conservative. I'm proposing potentially we could do 3 sets of regression test. Okay, so this is before you make. This is just when you change when you release the changes to the test server. Then you test you test those interviews that's on that list and see, okay, do these interviews really get affected? If that's the case, then you identify, okay, what they need to fix to resolve those problems. So that's the prefix regression test. And then you ask those people, I mean, you get those interviews fixed. And then you do a post-fix regression test. Now here, then, of course, then there's a question of who is responsible. I'm thinking, well, if the authors are still on the team, maybe they should be responsible. But if they have already left the team, then maybe we have to do it. And now, in order to get their attention, we can probably bring the list, go through the list on one of those calls and say, okay, we're making some changes, and then here are the interviews that will be affected. And then people can look at the list and go fix their own interviews. And then after that, so after they fixed it, they released it, and we did the post regression test. Now we merge the change. We don't have a test branch anymore in GitHub, right? It's just that branch. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. There's no dedicated test,
Right.
or we
So-
had
so
a
this-
development branch for a while. But we don't have that anymore.
So this, we don't even have a particular name for it. It's just people's own branches.
Right.
So at that point, we know it passed the test, so we just merge it to there. Okay, to some event. Oh, okay, this is just to remind me that we don't have other branches. Okay, once the code is merged, that means it's ready for release to production.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, subject to like this checklist, we're saying if it's merged with main, then it's ready to go. That's, I guess, worth changing the name of master to main in a checklist, just because we haven't made that change in all of our key repositories.
Okay, so at that point, when we release to the production, okay, the key change all the individual, right? So these two sets of changes need to be released at the same time. This is crucial, right? So we have our key packages, that's the Weaver or assembly line or whatever, and then also the individual changes, the individual interview chain fixes. It should be released to the production at the same time. So this now. Okay, so this is, I think, one of the things you were saying, Quentin, that we post a thread on Teams 24 hours before going live. But then, if possible, we can also just to be cautious and bring up and say, okay, we're going to release. Right. So at this point, do we need to run another test on production server? That's a question. So basically, the potential is 3 sets of tests: prefix test, post-fix test, both on test server, and then on production. Now that's the change cycle. So it's for the key packages and for sensitive changes only. For regular, the ones that don't have any possibility to affect other existing interviews, we don't have to go through this because this can be time consuming and we're doing changes, releases constantly. All right, so that's one section. Now the release log, I did a sample here. So I basically put all those steps that we just discussed and to here, and then we can just say, I was just doing I forget, what is it, code name or something? So we did it some, and just random put some things here. And then the list, you can list the interviews, whatever interviews that are going to be affected by these changes and listed here. So that's the list will be discussed in here.
Some of those I think can fit in the change log, but yeah, I don't know if we'd want a list of affected interviews in a change log.
So now
I don't know exactly how we want to.
Yeah, this is the starting point. As I said, I'm just getting something out here so we can brainstorm. So that's the release log. The dependency list is what I'm thinking is that we create a baseline kind of thing that we basically want to have a complete list of live interviews that have dependencies on our key packages. So include like interview URL, author name, whoever created it, and then what's the dependency, which ones are they?
Yeah, I'm wondering now, actually, if there's a way for us to get that dependency chain in a reliable way automatically. And I think probably not. So we should think about where we're going to maintain that. At least there's a really big backlog of interviews that we may not want to go in and touch unnecessarily that will have, they won't have dependencies in their setup.py, for example.
Right. Yeah, but this is basically just some thoughts. I'm just listening here. I want to go back to, I think I didn't explain one thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it might be worth taking time to think about that question just because it's kind of key for this idea. But if it's just a matter of where it's stored and we're like, well, we can get it some way, then I guess that's not necessary.
Yeah. Another thing I want to go back to here is that, I don't know where it is now, but basically what this one is saying, okay, if the interviews are on production, they are live, then we have a procedure, we can follow all these things. But if there are interviews that are still in development and our changes can potentially affect those ones, we have no control. So the only way we can inform them is to bring up on the team calls or on the website or whatever. I mean, on the Teams chat or whatever channels. So basically that's another pocket that can potentially be affected, but we have no control. We just need to let them know and let them fix them themselves. All right. So we went through the dependency list.
I think version control may help there a bit. Oh, not if they're on our own server, but if it's other people's stuff. It might be if there are other servers using assembly line and we're concerned about them, that's where versioning could especially help, especially with major minor patch type things. Assembler.
Are you saying version numbering of our package or of the individual?
Of our package.
So we are doing version numbering there.
I
but
thought we
think-
were doing still on pre-release versions.
We are, but it's, I mean, pre-release just has like less strict rules, but we're still trying to adhere to like major being, or sorry, we're still trying to adhere to like minor being new features and patch being like small fixes that you should just update to anyway.
Right, but we don't have one for breaking features so that people can decide to, you know, stick with something that isn't breaking yet.
So who's this hypothetical person who's going to do this? I guess that's my question is like, I mean, it's great to have
I thought
industry
ILAO.
scale practices, but not if there's nobody who's following them. But we're talking with Aleo already.
Yeah, we already have like really close communications with them, and they like Matt knows when we're updating and what we're updating and what's in it and stuff. And we help him. Like occasionally we'll help him if he's like if he needs help with updates.
Okay,
When we did have a problem there
Sounds
once,
good.
but I think, yeah, we resolved it by just having clear communication. I usually ping him whenever I do an update actually. No. So,
Yeah.
all right. If folks are
Uh,
happy, that sounds good.
and I am bumping the major version when we do a breaking, what I think is a breaking change.
Major or minor?
Okay,
Minor for, wait, patch is
I
the
think Michelle
third point, right?
Patch is the third one, minor's the middle one, and major's the first one, which I thought Michelle was right. We're still on major 0, which is like pre-release, and technically there are no rules for pre-release packages. If it starts with a 0 point something, then you can break whatever you want because you're still technically like beta or alpha or something.
We're on version 2.3.1. So I guess we made version 2, we switched from,
We did make version 2. Yeah.
we made version 1B MA virtual court and version 2 is assembly line. We haven't had any bumps to the major version since we made assembly line, actually started out at version 2. So,
Never mind.
cool. We're on Semver proper. Nice.
yeah, what I don't know is whether we should always. I'm not sure how important it is for us to increment the first number anytime we have a change that we think could be breaking.
Yeah, it's a weird thing of normally, and normally even in packages, you could do like deprecation stuff and like, here, we're gonna hang on to this, but I feel like I've talked about this in other calls, but DocAssemble makes it, because you can see everything everywhere at all times, DocAssemble makes it really easy to break people when like you might not be expecting to. So like any change that does anything could probably break someone somewhere. As long as you're like not solely adding new things on top of it or whatever. So it seems
Yeah, that's
That's-
basically
that
where it
could
was like,
go.
where's the line between a minor and a major change in DocAssemble? But
that's a different long tangent though. We probably shouldn't get on that too much, but
I don't know if it's as important for us to think about, does this map on December though, as to like, are the people who are using our stuff, do they know when there's changes and if they see what the changes are?
yeah, I guess the other simpler thing is, does DocAssemble actually let you choose tags? Or choose, not tags, but like choose the version that you install? It always installs the latest, right?
I
you
think you
update-
could install a branch, which is the same thing as a tag, I guess, right? So
No.
you
Well,
can't,
branches are, you can, like, in Git, branches and tags are pretty much the same thing, but I don't think DocAssemble treats them the same. If you have a tag, you can't pull that up on DocAssemble and install it specifically. You would have to make a branch from that tag and then do that, which this is definitely just not necessarily deficiencies of DocAssemble, but just like we're pushing DocAssemble to its limits, like at all times when it comes to managing packages. So this might just be something that we eventually push for in core, or like try to contribute ourselves.
yeah, I always thought maybe you could do it with URL manipulation, but I could be wrong about that. I haven't tested it. So that's something to explore to see if it's possible but yeah, so I mean, the idea there is like, can we kind of have version pinning for DocAssemble packages that are not on PyPI? And you can do version pinning on PyPI, so that could be a solution too.
Oh, you can, okay.
Yeah.
That would be.
You have to manually edit the setup.py file if you're using DocAssemble to handle a dependency installation.
Oh, okay.
But if you are installing it from the DocAssemble, update package menu, like I know there was a version of DocAssemble where we had to manually pin the version of pip. So that's where I saw you could do it. It just passes that to pip, whatever you put there. So the double equal sign, or you could use greater than equal sign. And that's passed on to pip. You put that into the.
Okay.
But I guess that's a design question. Like, do we want to try to encourage people to do version pinning, or do we want to try to build features so they're always backwards compatible? Which is annoying, but less complex.
I would lean towards, it feels like our audience is less technical, like in that they're not like this isn't most people's full-time jobs of like maintaining these interviews, and like they'll write them and they would mostly prefer them to sort of work. So I think we might encourage version pinning, and then when we do pushes that we think are really good, at least that it works for right now because our community is still small enough. But if whenever we do releases that are like, hey, this is a really good feature, you guys should consider like adding it to your interviews or just like updating, then we can sort of send out to the community where we know we just still like have open lines of communication with most people who are using this directly, and try and push for things, or just let people know that like, hey, this is a thing y'all can use now, like it's documented here. And then when they have the time or are ready, they can go and update it, as opposed to trying to keep the onus to be on us and keeping everything backwards compatible. And even the thing we add, like some people might not necessarily want, or like want to have to, not necessarily want, but just sort of like want to have to deal with at that point when we release it.
Right.
I
don't know
also
if
think at
that's
some
good.
point we will hit changes that we won't be able to make backwards compatible. So if we're planning to mostly make it backwards compatible, we still need to make plans for when things can't be backwards compatible.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, and that was what we did with MAVC. We decided to fork, which I don't think we should do again. I think that was easy choice when we were early on, and MAVC had a lot of deficiencies. So, I'm just saying, I'm thinking like if we said a target internally, like once a year at most, we would bump the major version, and that could have a breaking change. But in between, try to keep things backwards compatible and not have to make people monitor. I guess that's really what Semver is for, but that's what the point of having a minor version number is. It should always be backwards compatible, right?
Yeah, anything that's under major should be backwards compatible if it's major version.
So I'm not sure if I guess I don't know if this discussion fleshed out that much. But
I'm
Timing.
not sure we're addressing like Lily's, like what Lily is focusing on right now. Do we want to make sure we're still on track with that
Yeah, we may have
part of the
got
conversation?
tangent, sorry.
Yeah, I just have the last section, which is the server update procedure for key packages. So it's non-sensitive versus sensitive. Sensitive we discussed because the release log, I mean, potentially. The non-sensitive, I'm thinking, can we like generate report in GitHub? And also versus the, okay, so one is the server version snapshot, and one is the server versus GitHub version. That way we know, okay, which versions are on which server, and make sure that it is as what we expected. So then the question is, what first of all, can we do the automatic report, and also how often we should generate them? And once we have those reports, then what's the how quickly do we want to update if there's any discrepancy? And then that's the production versus test server. So those are questions just for us to think about.
So I think reports should be generated whenever we're about to install a new package, probably. It should, I'm not sure exactly what they will look like yet, but I think that's the only time it's really relevant to know the versions. As compared to the, unless we were thinking there was some process we wanted to use to keep packages on the test server. I mean, the test server in some ways should always have the latest version of everything, right? Because anything that becomes the latest version of something should get tested. That's why I'm thinking mostly. Not that it will automatically, I'm just saying like there's no reason it should ever be behind main or master of the various packages.
Yeah, I guess theoretically that should be the case, but what about like resources, or people have different priorities, they have to work on something else? I don't know, I'm just.
Or is that, do I have it wrong and we shouldn't update? Like, let's say we had a version of assembly line or package that gets used by everything that we want to test, but we still want to be able to deploy things to production that are smaller surface area. Do we want to have the test server be, a version behind an assembly line so that it can, so it should match production as well. So that's the thing that's changed.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking, but I know that last time we had a conversation that went, maybe it should be ahead of production. So, but I thought that the testing server was intended to match production. It's just, it's that small transition period where we're testing that production is going to work, right? So we're testing the main package on the testing server,
Correct.
assembly line itself.
Yeah, I think that at least the way I think about it is that production should match test as opposed to like test should match production or test should match something else. Like test should be whatever we're actively testing. And then if the tests work, then production should match test.
Okay.
I think
So
it
what's
does
the-
make it a bit awkward that both the interviews that are being developed and assembly line itself both go through the test server. Like it is a kind of conflict there between like testing if individual interviews are going to work in production as it is now versus whether assembly line is going to work with the current interviews.
I guess so, but
I don't know that we
it
can do
depends
anything
on-
about it. Just
Well,
bringing it up.
no, I mean, I think it's like it's a bottleneck question, right? Like, so is there a bottleneck there and do we have to worry about it?
Like,
Or is it small enough that it's not a bottleneck really?
yeah, like I guess how long does it take to do all these tests? Like, so how long would it be from the moment you install something on the test server to like going through your batch of tests and at the end and know it's ready to go on production or it's not ready? If it's not ready, you should revert back you should revert back to like whatever test was before and fix your stuff and then try again later. And then how many people are trying to do this all at the same time? I don't think most people are clamoring to have these releases to productions. There might be times where a lot are, like probably closest to like in a week or so when we have like 2 or 3 interviews that are ready to be released like in MVP stage. But that should only be like at the end of like batches of work, like end of the summer and stuff, mostly I feel. And maybe the end of semesters, depending on how far students and classes get with all of their interviews. And the
I'd be
February
surprised if
session.
any classwork, there might be like one interview from this coming semester for me that's ready to install production.
That's fair. I did say classes. I think I sort of meant more like fellows and the Lit Lab class specifically. But
Yeah, I guess it depends on how much they're extending work that was close to being done versus starting a new project, which probably that unrelated, we should probably talk about that with David at some point, you and me. Unless he already has ideas that he hasn't shared with us about it. But anyway, I had some thoughts about what could be a little bit better there.
but either way, I don't think there's too much of a bottleneck except during like maybe a few days, at which point it can spread out over a week or something.
And
Yeah,
at
I
which
can't
point
see
we
things
could
getting
choose
delayed more than
not
a
to
week.
make any major changes to assembly line itself during that time.
That's true. Yeah, because testing like a single interview that doesn't have any dependencies, I mean, we actually already have it written down here, right? There's not like the process for that is way less formal. And I don't, the main thing there is like making sure production's not running different versions of things. That was the main issue that we had, right? So I think that's right. If production is no more than a day behind test, that will improve all of our processes. And it does mean when we change test to have a new dependency package update, there's a day lag. It just means we can't install the smaller package that depends on it for that day or even a week. And I think that would be okay in as a rule. And if we have an exception, there should be good reason for the exception.
So again, the file is here, checklist under deployment procedure. So feel free to go to make changes.
Okay. Did that answer? Was there other kinds of feedback that you were looking for?
No, I think that's good. That's great. I mean, there's things that we have to see how they come out. I mean, for example, we need to create lists or reports, all those things. So as we get into the details of them, and then we may have more updates to make on the final. But for now, it's just something, starting point.
Something we could try is, I mean, if we feel like there's a way for us to test, like all the interviews start that are installed on the production server on the test server, and we could just do update all. Make sure that they all start. I don't know. Should we figure out some way to start getting production synced up with tests soon? Is there like a process that we should outline and have a plan for?
Well, at least we have some kind of comparison, produce some kind of report and see if there are discrepancies, then we'll make a decision from it.
I will
Absolutely.
say I didn't
Yeah.
quite understand what the report part of the process was, what the report consisted of, but if other people are clear on it, I can catch up later.
That is kind of what I'm digging into now. So I'm wondering, so the idea of the report would be to check the installed package version of everything on 2 servers and see what's different.
Right, that's one. Another is check the version of what's in the main, or yeah, just main, I guess.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just comparing test to
uh,
production to see the installed versions of stuff, right?
Right, so it's GitHub versus server. And then test
Okay.
server versus production server. So 2 separate reports.
So we do have an update all button. And that's where I'm wondering, like, is there a simplification there? Because we can update everything on test to the latest version in main. And at that point, what we want to do is make sure that didn't break any of the interviews that are also installed in production. And then we should start to sync those up so that they're never more than a day or 2 behind, right? I think that's what we just outlined. Am I wrong?
Well, if you do it that way, then what about the ones that have been installed on test server right now that are being tested? Then you will wipe them out, right? Would you?
Well, we would still let those get tested. Presumably, if they're only on the test server and there wasn't a plan to get them to production, they may not, the developer may not think that they work on the test server yet. That may not be what you're asking. Is that responsive, Lily, to what
Okay,
you were
maybe
asking?
I should ask preliminary questions. Who can install on test server? Can developers
Anybody.
install?
Mhm.
They
Well,
can,
developers
okay.
should all be able to, and I think we've given it out case by case, essentially. When someone thinks that they need to, we encourage them to get the permission and then install it themselves.
So when you're saying you updated test server to match the production server, you are only talking about our key packages, or are you talking about also the individual interviews as well?
When you say
Oh.
update all, that would be all the interviews, I think.
Yeah, it would update everything. We would only care about the versions matching for things that are installed on production though. Like we wouldn't try to go through every package on the test server. I just checked the production server has 25 packages installed on it that are DocAssemble specific. And then that, I mean, we created rather, that's what I should say. And then on the test server, I'm just gonna eyeball, I'm not gonna count it. Probably have about twice as many. So we wouldn't test 50 interviews on the test server. Or we wouldn't even care about the version of those. Just because it's on the test server doesn't mean it needs to be installed on the production, but if it is installed on both, the version should match.
Okay, so if someone had installed a newer version of their interview, then they will lose it, would they?
If they had installed like a branch specific version, you mean? Because
Yeah.
we would always update to what's on main, so it wouldn't be a different version if it was on if they had merged it to main.
Okay, so you're saying when they install their individual interviews, they don't install from their development branch. They always install from the main.
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, it shouldn't get onto the test server until it's had a, a review and a pull request, and then it's been merged.
Isn't it
Oh, then
sometimes when
that's-
it's under review from SMEs and they implement SME changes so on a different branch so the SMEs can see those changes?
People might have that habit. I guess we could use the developer server for that. We could change that process. I'm not sure how many people have been following it. Seems like a good habit, but
I think that's what's on the checklist. So is to update the installed version. That it might not specify branches though on the checklist. So I don't
Let
know
me
what
see.
their habit has been with that.
Let me just check to see if anything looks like it's not in the main or master branch right now on the test server.
Okay, cool.
I don't see so far. I'm scrolling.
So maybe we can add that to the checklist that when they make the changes from the review, they merge it to master, just so it's officially the process.
There's nothing in there now that says to merge their changes to master.
Not after implementing stuff from an SME.
Is that not
review.
implicit? If you implementing the changes from an SME, I feel like that implies
Well,
that it
sometimes
gets merged back in.
I could see reviewing with an SME and going, okay, I've made the changes on this branch. Can you check that this is what you want before I merge it into the main branch? I can see doing that. But if we say explicitly to put it onto main, then that at least will be a codified part of the process.
I guess I don't see that as being a barrier here, because I really what I was talking about is the first time that we sync them up. I'm not saying every day I go and update every package that's been installed. People will follow the process for updating it.
Right. But I think I get confused because in my checklist, actually, I got it wrong. I share it again.
Okay.
Here I was saying this test server should go from dev to test server. Once you pass the test, then it goes to main and go to production. So that sounds like
So this
Right.
is for individual interviews, not for assembly line. So it's not for a big sensitive change. It's for
I see.
the change of an individual interview.
But should we follow this?
Yeah, because if it's a dependency, we do need to test it with all the installed packages before and that makes sense, right? Like there's not a way to do that efficiently, at least. I guess we could have everything on the dev server. The installed version is going to be the version that we're testing it against, but still, it wouldn't be the same environment necessarily. This is a tricky conversation to have because there's so many different things we can mean by the different parts. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have it, but I feel like we probably can't finish it in -4 minutes. I just want to throw one more thing out there, which is we didn't even talk about DocAssemble version updates.
That is true.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So food for thought. I suspect we're not going to try to do the big sync, which I think we should plan a date for. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe the thing is like, we should always have been doing this, so there's no reason to slow down doing
And maybe have another discussion because I feel that would help us all to be on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. I think we need to talk about it more before we do big changes, but do we think, is there a small change? I mean, actually things are mostly in sync with versions, I think. So we just don't install that many packages. So like recently we installed an update to assembly line that we thought was fixing a data leakage issue. So that's installed on main. And we had some specific version conflicts that it's installed on main, on production, I mean. So the big sync may not be a big thing. But there's no reason to not update everything on the test server, right? That's a safe change to do. Not, I don't know that anything's out of date.
First, let's do a comparison and see how big is the discrepancy.
Okay, well, yeah, I think the answer is we should talk again in 2 weeks and then decide if anything needs to happen. I don't think anything seems urgent, so we'll wait for that.
Sure.
Okay, all right. We'll talk with everybody, so some of you tomorrow, and talk with the rest of you later.
Thank you.
Bye.